I'm James Curry. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an educator. I make my living editing morning news for KSTP.
I'm Jimmy Patino. I go by he, him, his pronouns. I teach at the University of Minnesota in the Department of Chicano and Latino Studies.
Yeah, so I was in the audience, in the Zoom audience for Jimmy's brown, black, and red power movement Zoom, and just kept it on the back burner as far as an interesting topic and something really unique and really eye-opening for me personally. And then when the fellowship came around, I thought this would be, in fact, I even shared it with Tina. I said, the overlap and intersection of, no one's really done really any kind of exhibit on that. And I thought it lent itself visually to that, and it was almost a no-brainer.
I guess I write a lot about solidarity and how to build solidarity. And in this case, it was across differences of legal status, how U.S. citizen Mexican Americans sometimes collaborated with undocumented Mexican immigrants. So that's led to other focuses on other forms of solidarity across racial groups. That's led me to this project to think about black, brown, and red power in the Twin Cities.
I guess emailed, just cold called Jimmy. He responded. We met. Worked out, where we both were with the subject. I'm a lay person in a sense, outside of just being culturally knowledgeable of black power movements and a little bit of AIM. But I leaned on him for all the connective tissue, and also took it upon myself to do the work that I needed to do.
I came to this project thinking about black power, brown power, the Chicano movement, and the American Indian movement, broader red power movements. We were just talking about it around 2020, I think, the summer. I was working with my student, Silali Escobar, who had just finished a senior thesis on the Chicano movement in St. Paul and in the Twin Cities. And we continued to work together that summer. And I've always had this question, not being from Minnesota, I'm from Houston, and I'd come here from California from grad school, but have taught here for a decade. And this interesting situation where these movements and communities all coexisted in the same space. And like James said, even in the scholarship, I haven't seen studies of them together, right? There's studies of them individually. And so this is a question I had with my own lens of what builds solidarity or what bars solidarity. Mm-hmm. And so I just had this question, like, what happens when we think about these movements together?
I've just enlisted a black-owned female design firm, Blackbird Revolt, and we're in the visioning phase and ideation phase. But yeah, I wanted to make this universal. I wanted to make it immersive, and that brought to me the ideas of the universe and constellations and dawn and dusk and sort of even primordial earth and before constructs of race, and as a backdrop. And then we've been working on a skeleton of a timeline of where these, starting big, where civil rights actually turns into black power or just people power, where influences lie, and how that can be tracked in a linear form. But the last thing I want to do is, and I hope it doesn't come down to this, is have eye-level text and a timeline. that wraps around.
Part of what James has asked me to help with directly is a timeline of events that occurred in the Twin Cities in the context of a larger revolutionary moment in the country and the world, but really honing in locally at the same time and primarily. So kind of a origin beginning around maybe the 1950s and the legacies of formal segregation, the experience of Native peoples being, in the 1950s, kind of their sovereignty being attacked and them having to migrate to cities like Minneapolis and St. Paul, and kind of the early forms of gentrification that happened for example, on the west side in St. Paul, which was the primary Mexican-American barrio, and people being uprooted and forced to move, which are really the beginnings of these power movements to respond to these policy decisions that are displacing and making unsafe Black, Brown, and Native people. And then the late 60s is an important moment with the emergence of particular organizations like the American Indian Movement, like the Brown Berets in the west side of St. Paul, and kind of Black Power institutions and activism, maybe best exampled in the Way, which was a kind of a community space on the north side.
It's not like the Way was supposed to solve everything, but here's a classic kind of well-funded grassroots organization that it didn't implode. It was probably making strides and rubbing against status quo so much that the status quo devised policies to remove key members or have key members resign, have less than stellar replacements, and then start attacking the actual facility with codes.
One of the things that I hope folks come away with is that there is this history of multiple communities attempting to solve these social problems. And I think that's germinating from the other questions, because I think there's a larger question of how do you write a multi-ethnic, multiracial, relational history and give the depth that all these communities and movements deserve while telling. So how are we going to do that? And I think we have some ideas about how we're going to do that.
The danger of the single story.
Right. So I hope folks come away with a narrative and a awareness that these movements existed and cohabitated and overlapped with one another in a complex and nuanced way.